To start the installation of the Windows Deployment Services, I first want to go into Server Manager, and I'm going to go ahead and add the role. Before I do that, just want to point out Active Directory, DHCP, and DNS are already installed on this machine. They don't have to be on the machine, they just have to be somewhere in the network. I'm going to go ahead and click Next on the welcome screen, and then I want to turn on Windows Deployment Services. Click on Next, and I have given the option of Deployment Server and Transport Server. I'm going to leave both of those turned on. The Transport Server gives us multicasting capabilities. Go ahead and click on Install. Now, Windows Deployment Services is successfully installed. However, it's not yet configured. To configure it, I'm going to expand roles, expand Windows Deployment Service, expand servers, and I'll see the domain here. And if I notice that I expand, there's no folders underneath there, so it's not yet configured. If I right-click on the fully qualified domain name of the machine and select Configure Server, in the wizard, I'm just going to click Next on the Before You Begin screen. For my location where I'm going to store my deployment files, I'm going to change that from the C drive to the E drive. I'm just going to leave it in the Remote Install folder. Click Next. For the DHCP option, I'm going to leave the defaults for that. And server initial settings. I do want the server to respond to client computers. In fact, I want it to respond to known and unknown client computers. So I'm going to go and select that option. If you do not have it respond to client computers, then you'd have to manually turn that on later. Okay. I'm given the option to add images to the server now. I actually don't want to do that at this time, so I'm going to turn that off because we're going to actually do that through the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. So I'm just going to click Finish, and you'll see that the folder structure is now set up in this Windows Deployment Server is ready to go. Now I need to go and install the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. The Microsoft Deployment Toolkit is actually a download, but I've already downloaded that in advance and stored it on my local drive. So I'm going to go into the location where I've downloaded it and run the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit 2010_x64 because I'm on a 64-bit machine. So I'm going to launch that, and it will step me through a wizard. Go ahead and click on Next. Accept the license agreement. And I'm going to keep the defaults for the components that are installed as well as the location. And click Install. This only takes about a minute. And once that's finished, I can just click Finish. Okay, I have the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit installed now. I also want to install the Automated Installation Kit. The Automated Installation Kit is an ISO file, and it's kind of big. It's about 1.8 gigabytes. I already have that mounted in my DVD drive, so I can go to the DVD drive and click Start CD and go ahead and launch that from the CD or from the DVD. There are options for taking a look at the documentation for a step-by-step deployment, run the AIK setup, which is what we're going to do, and then other tools and components that we might want to install. I'm going to go ahead and run the AIK setup. In the first screen of the wizard, I'm going to go ahead and click Next, accept the license agreement. I'm going to keep the default location for the install and allow it to be used by everyone on this computer. So click Next, Next again, and this installation will take about a minute or two to finish. Now that installation is complete, I can just click on Close and exit out of the DVD. Okay, now that we have the components installed, I just want to go ahead and log into the Deployment Workbench. The Deployment Workbench gives you the capability of managing and configuring your toolkit. Okay, if I go to Information Center and go to Components, you can see the different components that are installed. And if I go to the deployment share, you'll see that there's nothing in there. There's no folder set up. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and create a deployment share. So I'm going to right-click on the deployment share and do New Component, New Deployment Share. I could also click on the New Deployment Share under the Actions pane. I have to tell it where I want to create the folder. So in my case, I'm going to create it on the E drive instead of on the C drive, and then click Next. Give it a share name. I'm just going to keep the default, which is deployment share $, and the deployment share description. Do I want it to ask if an image should be captured? I'm going to go ahead and leave that checked. And do I want to ask the user to set the local administrator password? I'm going to leave that unchecked. And the product key, I'm going to leave the product key as well. And click Next. So I've pretty much taken the defaults. It's gone out, it's created that deployment share, and it's finished. And now if I expand the deployment share, you'll see that there are the folders and everything are set up in there. Now that we've got the deployment share set up, we need to go ahead and add operating systems and any drivers that we have that we want to add to our deployment. We can add those now. Let's go ahead and do the drivers first. So I'm going to click on Out of Box Drivers, right click, and Import Drivers. I'm going to browse to a location where I have drivers saved on my machine. Now these drivers that I have on my machine, these are basically just drivers that I've downloaded from the manufacturer, and I've put them into a drivers folder. And I've left the same structure that I've got from the individual manufacturers. If I browse to that location just to show you what it looks like, we're on the E drive in the drivers folder. You know, I have audio drivers, eSATA card drivers, Rico driver, which is a printer, video drivers, etc. Now, these are not necessarily the drivers for a virtual machine, and I'm running this configuration on a virtual machine, but I've done this to show you how simple it is, how easy it is to add drivers into your deployment. So I've selected that folder. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to select Next and Next. And it's going to go out, read through that directory structure, and pull in all of those drivers. Okay, once that's done, I can just click Finish. And the next thing, you'll see that all the drivers are listed there now. And the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and add an operating system. So I'm going to right-click, Import Operating System. In my case, in this particular instance, I'm going to do a full set of source files, which actually reads from a DVD. So I'm going to leave that selected, click Next. And it's asking me where that DVD is, so I'm going to go find the source. And that's under my computer. It's not in the DVD drive. I've actually copied that to a local folder on my computer, so I'm going to select that Win7 DVD folder. And I'm going to go ahead and move the files instead of copying them, just because it's a lot faster than making a duplicate of those files. And I'm going to say Next. Give the destination directory a name. Windows 7 x64 is fine. Summary is Next. And you see that happened almost instantaneously because I did a move. Had I done a copy, it would have taken a bit longer to copy those bits. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a task sequence. So if I click on Task Sequence, right-click, New Task Sequence. I'm going to give this a task sequence name of just reference. And what we want to do is we want to build our reference machine. So I'm going to call this Windows 7 Reference Computer. Next, and the standard client task sequence. There's different types of task sequences. In this presentation, we're pretty much going to use the standard client task sequence, but you could also sysprep and capture or do a custom task sequence or light touch, standard server, etc. In my case, we're just going to do a standard client task sequence and select Next. What operating system? It sees that we have these 4 operating systems available to us from when we imported the DVD. I'm going to go and select Windows 7 Ultimate. Now I have the opportunity to put in my key, like if you have an MAK key or a retail product key, open license key, whatever. If you want to put your key in, specify that in advance, you can do that here. In my case, we're going to just leave this to not specify a key. And for the username, I'm just going to put in Contoso user. Organization is Contoso. For the default internet homepage, you could put in like your your intranet site here, or in my case, I'm just going to do www.bing.com. And then the administrator password. Okay. And the summary, okay. And finish. It literally was that fast to create the sequence. Okay, the next thing we need to do is, now that we've got the task sequence created, the operating system files updated, and the out-of-box drivers updated, we need to go ahead and update the deployment share. So in order to do that, I'm going to right-click on MDT deployment share and select Update Deployment Share. And I want to optimize the boot image updating process. I do not want to compress, and just click Next. And that's going to go out and it's going to create my WIM files. It's going to create my ISO files, things that I need to build this image for deployment. This will take a few minutes to complete, because it's actually going through, and based on the settings that I've put in there and the files that I've entered into the deployment workbench, it's actually creating the ISO and WIM files that I need. Okay, that process is completed successfully. So I'm just going to scroll down and show you what that looks like. And we can click on the Finish button. Next, the WIM files that were just created, those have to be imported into WDS. So I'm going to go into Boot Images, right-click. Again, I'm in the Server Manager, Windows Deployment Services. I'm going to go into Boot Images, right-click, Add Boot Image, and browse to the location. The location of the files that we had set is going to be in the deployment share, which in my case is on the E drive under deployment share. And under the boot folder, we should see the WIM file. The light touch PE_x64 is the one we want to import. So I'm going to select that and click Next. Give it an image name. Keep the default. Next. The operation is complete, and we can just click on the Finish button. The next step is actually to boot, is to PXE boot the reference computer, the computer that we're going to actually deploy Windows to. We're going to hit F12 to do a network boot. And you see now that it's loading the Windows image file, the light touch PE_x64.wim from the WDS server. Okay, so it's brought up the welcome screen for the Windows deployment, and it's giving me the option to run the deployment wizard to install the operating system. Now I need to put in my credentials. And the task sequence that are available is the one that we created, to deploy Windows 7 to the reference computer. I'm going to give this a computer name. I'm just going to call it reference. I'm not going to join it to the domain, but I do have the option to do that if I wanted to. And I do not want to restore user data. If I had used USMT to save user data, I could then restore it as part of the process. And my language preferences, I'm going to leave the default. My time zone, I'm going to go ahead and change that. And it's giving me the option of whether or not I want to capture an image of this reference computer. And the answer to that is yes, I do. So I'm going to turn on capture an image of this reference computer. I'm going to tell it where to capture it to. I'm going to leave the default, which is under the deployment share in the captures folder, and it's going to call it reference.wim. So I'm going to say next and begin. Notice it's formatting and partitioning the disks, and once it finishes that, it will go ahead and do the install. Fast forward about 20 or 30 minutes later, and it's completing the installation of Windows. And it's getting to the point where it's asking me for the product key. I am going to not put that in for the moment. Notice it is preparing the desktop. Fast forward a little bit, and it's executing the sysprep step. It's doing a sysprep because we told it we wanted to sysprep the machine and recapture it. Fast forward a little bit more, and you see we're creating the WIM file, so we're capturing the image of that machine. Fast forward again, and the reference computer operating system deployment completed successfully. And if we were to continue to boot that machine, it would have been sysprepped, so the first thing that we're going to get to is type in your username. And finally, we have our desktop. Now that we have finished the capture of the reference machine, we need to add that WIM into the workbench. So to do that, I'm going to right-click on Operating System, and do Import Operating System. And instead of doing a full set of source files, which is the DVD, I'm going to do a custom WIM file. That's the WIM file that we created during the deployment of the reference computer. I'm going to browse to the location, and where we put that was on the E drive under the deployment share, and it should be in the captures folder. And there it is, reference.wim. And I'm going to go ahead and move this for the sake of speed to instead of copying those bits. And I do not need to sysprep this, so I'm going to go ahead and just click Next. For the destination directory, I'm going to just call that reference. And finish, and finish. Okay, now you'll see that we have the reference computer, the reference WIM file, installed as an operating system. At this point, we can go ahead and set up the task sequence to actually deploy that Windows, that version of Windows from that WIM file into our target computer. So the way to do that is if I right-click on task sequence and do new task sequence, I'm going to go ahead and just call this target and deploy Windows 7 to target computer. Next. I'm going to do a standard client task sequence again. And this time I'm going to go ahead and select the reference WIM. Next. And I'm not going to specify a product key. I need to put in an organization name, so I'm just going to put Contoso. And I'm going to go ahead and put in Bing for my default home page. Next. I have to authenticate. Next. And summary, I'm done. And now the task sequence is finished. So if I look at my task sequences, I'll see that I now have the deploy Windows 7 to the target computer. At this point, all I need to do is do a network boot on the target computer to actually deploy that image. So let's go take a look at that. Okay, I'm booting the machine, and whenever it finds the DHCP server, I just need to press F12 to go ahead and do a network service boot. And you can see that it's found the Windows deployment server, and it's downloading the lighttouchpe_x64.wim to run the pre-installation execution environment. Okay, so now I have my solution accelerator up, which is the WDS deployment menu, and I'm going to go ahead and do install a new operating system. I have to give it credentials. And I get to choose the deployment that I want to do. Now, again, we're on the target machine now. We're on the machine that we're ultimately going to deploy to our end user. I want to do deploy the Windows 7 to target computer. Click Next. Give it a computer name. I could go ahead and join the domain here, or I could keep it in the workgroup. I do not have any user state migration tool data to restore, so I'm just going to go ahead and click Next. My language and other preferences. I'm going to go ahead and change my time zone. And it gives me the opportunity to go ahead and enable BitLocker. I'm going to skip that for now. And ready to begin. So it gathers the local data, and then it goes right into formatting my drives, setting up my partitions, stuff like that. And it will go through the process of installing the OS, any applications I might have set up, my different preferences and stuff like that. So that's going to take about 30 or 40 minutes, and we're going to fast forward and get to the point where we're at completion. After fast forwarding, we get to the point where the operating system deployment completed successfully, and we